inspector calls us a morality play that was first performed in 1945 in the Soviet Union, written by J.B. Priestley. It centers around the well-to-do middle-class Berling family and their involvement in the death of a working-class woman named Eva Smith.
What a lovely, kind, and generous family the Berlings are. They give back to the community, they respect others, and all that. No, actually, between the four of them, they could have caused the deaths of thousands of Eva Smiths. Overall, the Berlings represent the Hobbesian egoism that is prevalent in human nature, or the desire of self-preservation. They want to be at the top, the most successful out of everybody else. Sure, their desire to be successful is a good thing for them, but in order for them to do so, they're willing to limit the opportunities of others. They also represent the issues in the social hierarchy, or the rich versus the poor.
But what we're mainly going to talk about today are the deadly sins and how they're embodied by each of the Berlings.
Mr. Berling, our favorite businessman. He's a former mayor of Brumley and also the former potential receiver of a knighthood. He grew up poor as demonstrated by his possession of a country accent, yet he won't give his poor factory workers a 3-shilling pay raise. Nouveau riche forget where they come from, and they're often ignorant of their roots. It's fairly obvious that the sin he represents is greed, or the continuous cycle of it. His greed for money led to the loss of a job for Eva Smith and started a long-term tragic events for her. This is only because she asked for an increase in her wages, so you could say he believes in money over morals. Let's meet his wife, the lovely Mrs. Sybil Berling, born and raised in a wealthy high-class British family, posh accent and all that. She personifies the sin of pride and the fact that those she has the resources and position to help someone, she'd rather keep up her pride than help them.
She just doesn't stop at being indifferent to Eva's suffering. No, she then turns to wrath, outright refusing to help Eva.
She's a highly esteemed chairwoman of the women's charity organization, selecting cases that would best benefit from her help, or really anybody they like enough to give a couple pounds to. Perhaps to give the person who needs some charity, but with a catch. This concept is called there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. The free lunch refers to the old traditional bars in the US where they provided a free lunch to patrons who had purchased at least one drink. However, the food and offer was usually high in salt, resulting in the patron buying a lot of beer to make up for the saltiness. Sheila Berling, the envy of all the girls around her. She represents the sin of envy or jealousy. Eva had just been sacked at Berling & Co. and had no hope until she had a stroke of luck and got a steady job at Nobles. She'd been quite happy there, until Sheila Berling happened. Like normal people who get jealous of others, she didn't like that Eva Smith was prettier than her, so as we all do when we're jealous, she gets the person she's envious of fired and out of a secure, well-paying job. All things considered, Sheila's still probably the most human out of the others in her family. She accepts that she's contributed to the death of Eva unlike her parents. This says a lot about the moral state of this family. Another thing that's noticed in Sheila is the parallel observed between her and her mother. Both let their pride interfere with the way that they treat others, and in the end it backfires on them.
Now let's meet her brother Eric. He's definitely the type of boy you bring home to your parents. He carries a sin of gluttony, he's an experienced drinker, and he's basically an alcoholic. He seems to be the rebel of the family. He drinks far too much and is unable to meet the pressure and expectations that are pressed upon him as a Berling. Not to mention, he threatens women and treats them as objects of gratification. During his romantic affair with Eva, he gets her pregnant and he's sympathetic of her cause, so he gives her money. But where does the money come from? So on top of everything else he's done, he also embezzles money from his father's extremely honest and hard-working company. One running question one has after reading this play is, who's the most guilty in causing the death of Eva Smith? So even though Mr. and Mrs. Berling are shifting the blame onto every other person in the family, they just refuse to take the blame for any contribution to the death of Eva Smith. So they shift the blame around, and rather than confronting their bad decisions, they try to cover it up, much like children. Shifting the blame is also a coping mechanism in the aftermath of guilt or negative emotions, as humans don't like having a guilty conscience. After they found out the inspector wasn't really an inspector, they're prepared to let go and forget anything that ever happened, not taking any moral responsibility to improve their actions and outlook on life. On the other hand, Sheila and Eric are able to accept that they've committed sins, taking moral responsibility, and they outwardly show that they're regretting decisions that they've made. In the inspector's speech, he notes that if men will not learn that they are responsible for each other, then they'll be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. This is a metaphor for war, which is also ironically mentioned in the beginning of the play. Everyman, a medieval morality play, also mentions this, with a similar character to the inspector that shows the main character the error of their ways. The inspector also says, "One Eva Smith has gone, but there are millions and millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, all intertwined with our lives and what we think and say and do.